My alarm went off at 7:30 a.m., just like it does every day. I rolled over, got out of bed, and checked my phone. There was no messages. I stumbled into the bathroom and took a shower. Then I brushed my teeth and fixed my hair in the mirror. When I was finished, I went downstairs. The familiar smell of bacon and eggs was wafting down the hallway. I walked into the kitchen, and what I saw made me stop in my tracks. The man sitting at the table, reading the newspaper, was not my father. The woman at the stove preparing breakfast was not my mother. Both of them were strangers. I backed out of the kitchen and sat down at the bottom of the stairs to gather my thoughts. I was in shock, unable to take in what I had just seen. Who were those people? What were they doing in my house? Where were my parents? My mind was racing and my heart was beating fast. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront them? Should I call the police? Was I losing my mind? Just then, I heard the woman shout from the kitchen, "Honey, are you coming down for breakfast?" I sat there at the bottom of the stairs, unable to move, unable to answer. She called out again, "Honey, get up, your breakfast is going to get cold." A minute later, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway, and the man appeared. "Hey son, what are you doing sitting there? Breakfast is ready." Reluctantly, I got up and followed him into the kitchen. He sat down at one end of the table, and I sat down at the other. "What's the matter?" the woman asked. "Is there something wrong, son?" the man inquired. "Did you get enough sleep?" Yeah, I muttered in reply. The man went back to reading his newspaper. The woman put a plate of bacon and eggs on the table in front of me. I racked my brain. Maybe there was an explanation for all of this. Maybe they were just some long-lost relatives I have never met before. Maybe my parents had gone out for a walk. Maybe they were still asleep upstairs. Finally, I gathered up the courage and asked them a question. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "What kind of question is that?" he said. "Well, your parents, of course." My heart sank. I almost gave up hope. I couldn't process what was going on. Suddenly, my phone started vibrating. I took it out of my pocket and looked at the screen. It was a message from my father. I breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, I would have an explanation for what was going on. But when I opened the message, inside was just one word: help.
My little brother's name is Arthur. This afternoon, I pushed him into the pool. He fell in with a big splash and started making glug 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 sounds. Just when I thought he was about to drown, he managed to cry out for help, and Mom and Dad came running. Mom was crying because she thought that Arthur was dead. He wasn't. The doctor came and Arthur is doing very well now. He asked for cake with jam, and even though it was 8 o'clock and past his bedtime, my mother gave it to him anyway. Arthur was very happy and very proud with all the attention he was getting. Everyone was asking questions. Mom asked him how he had fallen into the pool, and Arthur just said he slipped. It was smart of him to say that. He knows Mom hates a tattletale. The other day when I was wrapping a skipping rope around his neck, he struggled out of my grip and ran to complain to Mom. He said I'd been trying to strangle him. Mom told him he shouldn't say such things and gave him a good spanking. When Dad came home and found out what Arthur said, he was also very angry. Arthur didn't get any dessert. Then he understood. This time he knew better than to tell Mom I had pushed him into the pool. I also asked Mom if I could have cake and jam. I asked her 3 times, but she pretended not to hear me. Maybe she suspects that I was the one who pushed Arthur. Before, I was always nice and kind to Arthur because Mom and Dad spoiled me as much as they spoil him. When he got a new toy car, I got a new doll. Mom would never give Arthur cake without giving it to me as well. But last month, Mom and Dad completely changed. Now they devote all their attention to Arthur. He gets gifts all the time. It made him very big-headed. He was always a bit of a pain in the neck, but now he's insufferable. He's constantly asking for this and that. Mom and Dad always give him whatever he asks for. The only thing they scolded him was the day I tried to strangle him with a skipping rope. That was funny because, for once, it wasn't his fault. I wonder why Mom and Dad suddenly stopped loving me. It looks like I'm no longer their little girl. Whenever I kiss Mom on the cheek, she doesn't even smile. Dad is the same way. When they go for a walk, I always tag along, but they don't pay any attention to me. If I'm playing on the road or doing something dangerous, they don't even care. Arthur can be nice occasionally, but most of the time, he refuses to play with me. The other day I asked him why Mom and Dad had become so cold to me. He looks up at me with a sly smile and refuses to answer. He did it on purpose to enrage me. That was the day that I wrapped the skipping rope around his neck. I was so mad that despite the spanking he had received, I went into his room afterward and told him that I would kill him. This afternoon he told me that Mom and Dad and him were going to the seaside and that they weren't bringing me with him. Then he laughed and stuck out his tongue and made faces at me. So I pushed him into the pool. Arthur is sleeping now and Mom and Dad are watching TV. The skipping rope was just lying in the garden, so I picked it up. In a moment I'll sneak into Arthur's bedroom, and this time I won't give him a chance to scream. That way, Mom and Dad will be forced to go to the seaside without him. And after they leave, I'll go to the end of the garden and climb back into that horrible white box that they buried me in. When I was younger, there was an abandoned building at the bottom of our street. All of the kids in the area kept well away from it, because the rumor was that it was haunted. The concrete walls of the old 2-story building were cracked and crumbling. The windows were broken and shards of glass lay all over the floor inside. One evening, as a test of courage, my best friend and I decided to explore the creepy old place. We climbed in through the window at the back of the building. The whole place was dirty and there was a layer of mud on the wooden floor. As we dusted ourselves off, we looked up and were shocked to see that someone had written the words, "I am dead," on the wall near the ceiling. Probably just some teenagers trying to scare kids. Yeah, probably. We explored more of the rooms on the ground floor. In the room that appeared to have once been a kitchen of sorts, we found more writing on the wall. It read, "I am in a room upstairs." We walked up the creaking stairs to the second floor. I led the way and my friend followed close behind. I wasn't scared, but he was beginning to get a little jittery. When we came to the top of the stairs, we turned left and walked cautiously down the narrow hallway. At the end of the hallway was a closed door with some more ominous writing on it. "You will find me in this room." By now, my friend was shaking with fear. I was quite creeped out too, but I didn't want to show it. He told me he didn't want to go any further, but I insisted, telling him there was nothing to be afraid of. I turned the handle and the door creaked open. We stepped into the room and found it empty. There were only 2 closed doors on either side. There was more creepy writing on the wall. My head is on the left, and my body is on the right. As soon as my friend saw this, he completely lost his nerve. He turned to run away. I caught hold of his arm, but he shook me off and fled out through the open door. I heard his footsteps disappearing off down the hallway. I was determined to be brave and overcome my fear, mustering all my courage. I opened the door on the right and walked inside. I walked to the other side of the room, and on the wall, written in tiny letters, were the words, "My body is underneath." I looked down at the floor. I was standing on some more writing on the floorboards. I stepped back and saw the words,
"My head is coming from the room behind you. Turn around."
I heard the door behind me creaking and quickly turned. There was a shadow moving behind the door. Suddenly something rolled into the room and came to a rest against the wall. It was my friend's severed head. His dead, sightless eyes seemed to stare at me. I screamed in horror and I flung myself. out through the open window, and I fell 2 stories to the ground. I landed on my side, breaking my arm. In horrible pain, I ran home, crying and yelling for my parents. The police were called and they searched the old abandoned building. At first, they didn't find anything. There wasn't even any writing on the wall. They combed the house from top to bottom but didn't find any traces of my friend. Then they priced up the floorboards. His body was lying underneath. They never found his head.
I left my country for a fresh start, got into a new school. I made new friends, and I looked for an apartment. I don't like living in hostels with boys. So I rented an apartment near my campus. I got it at a low price. Oh well, what a lovely spacious apartment this is. Here I will have some fun time with my new friends. I spent my day making arrangements at my apartment. And it was finally my first night. Lying on my bed, suddenly, I heard the sound of walking on the street. Some children were singing a strange song. Rose is red, violet is blue. You better run before it comes to you. Man, that was weird. I neglected those children and slept peacefully. Suddenly, I started feeling cold. I heard the sound of the door opening. I could hear those kids. Some song from afar. I woke up in a panic, wondering if there was anyone in my apartment. When I turned my head, a terrible clown stood in the front of my bed with a bloody knife in his hands. Ah! I ran as fast as I could, and everything went black. I woke up. Oh my God, it was a nightmare. The next morning, I was in the toilet checking my phone. I found something that scared me badly. A picture of me sleeping, although I slept alone.
I remember waking up one night to the sound of scratching coming from inside my bedroom. Rubbing my eyes, I sat up and listened again, placing a hand on my ear. The sound seemed to be coming from inside the walls, and it was moving. I was a curious little girl back then, so I got out of bed and followed the noise out of my room and down the hall. My parents were fast asleep, so I had to tiptoe the entire way. The sound led me all the way down to the basement. Opening the basement door, I descended the stairs and followed the sound to a crawl space I didn't even know I had. Since I'd already come this far, I got down on my hands and knees and crawled inside. It was dark and cramped, but I kept crawling until the sound suddenly disappeared. I paused for a moment when I heard a loud squeak behind me, and quickly looked over my shoulder. To my absolute horror, a pack of rats were standing right behind me, blocking the way I came. I screamed and started crawling further into the tunnel as the rats gave chase, hungrily snapping their teeth behind me. Eventually, I came to a dead end. I rolled onto my back and watched as the rats slowly approached me. I raised both of my feet off the floor and bent my knees back, preparing to kick them if they got too close. Stay back, or else, I stuttered. But the rats weren't scared of me. Why would they be? Nosy little girls didn't come down here that often, so I must have looked like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Tears ran down my cheeks as I lay there, trembling, feet raised in the air, waiting for them to attack, as if to taunt me. The rats kept snapping their teeth. The closer they got, suddenly they lunged at me, ready to feast. And that's when I woke up. I was relieved it was all a dream, until I heard a sound. under my bed.
Subscribe Horror Black Candy for more videos.
It was a hot summer when I went hitchhiking around the country. I was looking for adventures to tell my friends who chose a boring summer job instead, and took only a small backpack with me on the journey. It started out smoothly. I easily got out of the city and soon I was 100 miles away from home. All of the drivers had interesting stories to tell, and I found myself falling in love with hitchhiking in a matter of days. I stayed at a hotel, and as I reached more rural lands, I slept in a barn twice in a row. It got a little harder to find cars that agreed to take me with them, which I understood. But even as the drivers got more cautious about taking strangers with them in more remote places, I didn't feel like anything but adrenaline and freedom. At last, I was able to get a ride, and I asked the woman if she knew a place to stay. She told me I was in luck. She was on her way to work as a receptionist in a hotel. It was next to a graveyard, though, she said, and I laughed before brushing it off. After all these hikes, a graveyard should be the last thing to scare me. We reached the hotel, a small white building with angelic status all over the terrain. Tall grass and wildflowers grew everywhere and gave the place something peaceful, as if barely touched by humans at all. I checked in and thanked the woman for the drive. After having slept on hay for 2 days, I finally felt how exhausted I was when I opened the room and dropped on the bed first. The clean, typical smell of hotels surrounded me, and feeling safe and tired, I quickly fell asleep. It was nighttime when I opened my eyes again, and I realized the moonlight had woken me. I got up to close the curtains and glanced at the graveyard underneath my window. The statues and graves bathed in the moonlight. A quiet and beautiful sight. I opened the window to hopefully lose some heat and went back to sleep. Thunder awakened me next. I sluggishly opened my eyes, being woken up in the middle of my deep sleep. The curtains blew in the wind and the moonlight had disappeared, leaving my room pitch black, and suddenly, cold. I sat up slowly, picking up the sounds of rain tapping on the window, as well as reached for my nightlight. The same tapping sounds froze my hand midair. Those sounds couldn't be caused by rain? "Who's there?" I called, and I immediately realized how stupid that was. I slept on the third and highest floor of the building. There couldn't be anyone outside. The tapping became a shrill noise, like metal scraping against glass, and I put on the nightlight before getting out of the bed. The tapping stopped. I shoved the curtains aside. There was nothing there, and soon I thought it must have been my own imagination. With my hand on the handle to close the window, I looked down at the graveyard, and my heart stopped. A dark figure stood amid the gravestones, his face in shadows, until he suddenly looked at me. He jumped onto the building and began crawling his way up like a lizard. He got up so fast that he was able to get face to face with me in a matter of seconds, and I slammed the window shut, barely in time. The creature watched me silently, scraping with his yellow nails across the glass, and for a minute there was nothing else I could do than just look at its horrible face. Skin hung in shreds from his face, and his eye sockets were filled with insects crawling out to enter his smiling mouth with rotten teeth. Trembling with fear, and my heart high up in my throat, I finally turned around and left the room. Automatic lights jumped on in the hallways, and I dashed down the stairs. I ignored the strange darkness of the reception hall and headed for the exit, but an obscure figure froze me in my tracks. Her empty socket stared at me. A smile plastered on her lips, and with shock I realized that it was the woman who'd given me a ride. She
She sat very still, as if held upright with strings, and flies buzzed around her face. I nearly held in a scream and quickly continued my way out, never once looking back. The rain still poured from the sky, and the angelic statues had gotten something malicious in the stormy night. I ran across the terrain to get to the road and felt a rush of relief when two headlights appeared in the distance. The car slowed down by the side of my waving arms, and I quickly got inside when I heard the locks open. The car immediately locked again and started driving. I wanted to apologize to my driver for stepping inside his car, soaking wet, but my voice failed me. When I dropped out of school, it wasn't easy to find work. Nobody seemed to want to hire a girl with no qualifications. I was tired of applying for jobs advertised in newspapers and on the internet without receiving any replies. One day I spotted an ad for a job that was not so tempting, but I really needed the money. The ad said they were looking for a live-in babysitter to take care of 3 young children. It said no qualifications were necessary. They just required someone young, responsible, and pretty. I called the number, and the phone was answered by a woman with a sweet and friendly voice. When I told her I was calling about the babysitting job, she hired me on the spot. She didn't even want to meet me in person first, but she said she needed me to start immediately. I was delighted. The next morning, I drove over to the house to meet the family. As soon as I got there, I saw that the house was beautiful both inside and out. You could tell that the family was wealthy. The woman and her husband greeted me with broad smiles on their faces and introduced me to their children. There were 2 boys and a girl. Sebastian was 6 years old, Damien was 5, and Lenka was 4. The kids seemed to be nice, happy, and friendly. They were always polite, never fought with each other, and never made a mess. All they did was play alone or read a book. The parents announced that they were going out to dinner and wouldn't be home until late that night. They told me the children had already been fed, so all I had to do was get them ready for bed. The mother gave me a phone number and told me to call her if there was an emergency. The father told me to make myself at home, and if I was hungry, he said I could take whatever I wanted from the refrigerator. After their parents left, the children sat down on the sofa to watch TV. They were very quiet and barely said a word. During a commercial, I was feeling a bit hungry, so I went into the kitchen to make myself a snack. As I was rummaging around in the refrigerator, I couldn't help but notice 2 large jars that were stuffed in the back of the fridge. Both of them were wrapped in plain brown paper and had a rubber band sealing the rim. I wondered what on earth could be in them. My curiosity got the better of me, so I took out one of the jars and peeled back the brown wrapper to take a little peek. It was full of long strips of fatty meat floating in a murky red liquid. I couldn't tell what kind of meat it was, but it didn't look like pork or beef. Just as I was about to put the jar back where I found it, I heard a noise behind me. It startled me so much, I banged my head on the shelf above me. When I turned around, Sebastian was standing in the doorway staring at me. "Put that back," he said. "That's not for you." The look on his eyes and the tone of his voice sent chills down my spine. "Sorry," I muttered. "I was just looking for something to eat." Sebastian didn't reply. He just stood there, staring at me. I placed the jar back in the refrigerator and shut the door. Sebastian turned around and went back to the living room. I lost my appetite, so I went and joined the children in the living room and watched cartoons with them. I was trying to not let my imagination get the better of me when the cartoons finished and the news came on. There was a story about a teenage girl who had gone missing. The police found her decomposing head in a dumpster. They said they had no idea what had happened to the rest of her. I was afraid the grisly news story would upset the children, so I changed the channel and told them it was time for bed. The kids didn't complain. They just walked up the stairs in single file and went to their bedroom. I put them in their pajamas and got them ready for bed. Then I tucked them in, kissed them all goodnight, and switched out the lights. When I came back down, I was bored and had absolutely nothing to do, so I decided to watch a movie. I looked through the family's DVD collection, but all they had were cartoons and Disney movies. I wasn't in the mood for any more kids' stuff. On the bottom shelf, I spotted some old VHS tapes. One of them had a strange title. It was M Girls. This seemed rather curious, so I decided to take a look at it. I put the videotape in the VCR and pressed play, then sat down on the sofa and made myself comfortable while the video started. The first thing I noticed was that it was a home video. The family must have recorded it themselves. The parents and children were all laughing and looking like they were having fun. I was about to turn it off when I happened to notice someone else in the video. It was a girl who looked like she was in her late teens. It seemed like she was the previous babysitter. She looked very familiar. It seemed like I recognized her from somewhere. Perhaps she went to my school? Then it finally hit me. Oh my freaking God! It was the missing girl from the news report. My hands were shaking. My whole body was trembling. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. I jumped out of my seat, ejected the video, and put it back in its case. Then I remembered the jars in the refrigerator. I had to see what was in those jars. With a shudder, I went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Maybe I'm just overreacting, I thought. I reached and took out the second jar, peeled back the brown paper wrapper. I could see long pale hunks of meat and strips of fat floating in the red liquid. Some of the meat looked like it had skin on it. Human skin. I could also see what looked like strands of hair. Long hair. Human hair. I was so scared. I felt like I was about to pee my pants. I ripped off the rubber band that was sealing the jars and peered inside. There was an eyeball staring back at me. Horrified, I dropped the jar and it smashed on the kitchen floor. I ran to the living room, put on my jacket, grabbed the videotape and stuffed it into my pocket. When I came out of the hallway, Sebastian was standing at the foot of the stairs. "Where are you going?" he asked. I just remembered," I stammered. "I forgot something. I have to go home and get it. I'll be back in a few minutes." Damien and Lenka came running down the stairs. "You can't go," screeched Damien. "You can't leave us on our own." "I'm calling our parents," shouted Lenka as she picked up the phone and began dialing numbers. Sebastian grabbed hold of my leg and wouldn't let go. "You have to stay," he squealed. "We're hungry." His grip was extremely tight, but I managed to shake him off and ran out the front door. As I dashed to my car, I saw the parents pulling into the driveway. I didn't stop for a moment. I just jumped into my car and locked all the doors. The children were on the doorstep screaming and crying. The mother and father got out of their car and they came running over. There was an angry look on their faces. "What's wrong?" they shouted. "Where are you going? Come back here." I didn't answer. I just turned the key in the ignition and revved the engine. They started banging on the windows. I floored the accelerator and tore out of there like a bat out of hell and never looked back. I didn't stop until I came to the police station. I told the police officers everything I knew and handed over the videotape as evidence. The police immediately dispatched 2 patrol cars. By the time they arrived at the house, the parents and children were gone. They just took their car and disappeared. The police searched the house and found the jars in the refrigerator. They also found human flesh and bones in the basement. They did tests and confirmed that these were the remains of the missing girl. They never managed to track down the parents of the children. They're still out there somewhere. Probably living under a different name. Probably still on the hunt for new victims. If you want my advice, be careful who you are babysitting for.
I recently met Emily, and we immediately bonded. We became best friends as we soon realized we had lots in common. I took permission from my parents to stay at my new best friend's house. She asked me at what time should she expect me. "I'll be there in a few minutes," I told her. I was about to hang up, but then I saw a human figure behind her. It was dark and small in size. "Something or someone is behind you." "What?" "Look behind you." "You're joking." "No, someone is there," I insisted nervously. "You're kidding me, right? I have watched those stupid videos." The figure disappeared in a blink. Maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, I thought. I tried not to think about it. We both sat on the sofa watching TV. "I think the pizza delivery guy is at the door." It was a large and delicious pepperoni pizza. A few hours later, in which we talked about our lives, Emily went to take a shower. I was lying down on the sofa watching TV. Suddenly, a news flash. It said a murderer had escaped, and the authorities advised people to be careful and stay at home. The police were searching for him. I didn't think too much about that, though, and that was my mistake. I decided I wanted some ice cream. I walked through the hallway towards the kitchen. When I entered the kitchen, I saw the back door of the kitchen was open. I got scared, and I thought maybe someone entered the house, a kidnapper, or maybe a robber, or that murderer. I lost my desire to eat ice cream as I saw a figure standing in the corner of my eyes. As I turned my head in that direction, I saw there was a little girl standing there. She was looking down to the floor. "Oh my God, you scared me. Who are you? Did you open the door?" I asked. She didn't say anything and just stood there. There was a deep silence for a while, a silence that started scaring me. My body was shaking. All of a sudden, the little girl said, "Can I get an ice cream, please?" I felt a little relief, and I replied hesitantly, "Hey, who are you? Did you open the door?" I asked, but the little girl didn't answer. "Sister, can I get an ice cream?" She extended her hand towards me. Her face was pale. She had long black hair covering her eyes. Her lips were dry. There was no expression on her face. I took no time. I opened the fridge, picked up an ice cream, and gave it to her. "Take it. Can I know your name, little angel?" I asked hesitantly. The little girl didn't reply. She started walking into the back door. As she was about to exit and finally replied, "My name is Olivia." She left and closed the door. I ran back to our room and jumped to the bed and closed my eyes until morning. In the morning, I told my friend about the strange meeting. My friend told me that years ago, Olivia, her sister, was killed by an ice cream seller. I couldn't believe that I talked to a ghost and gave her ice cream. My friend Emily said that sometimes people experience thought transmission. This meant that maybe I didn't see Olivia's ghost, but perhaps Emily's memories were channeled to me through dreams while we were both sleeping. And so I experienced a hallucination. This explanation made me feel more comfortable. The next weekend, I was home alone. I invited Emily to come over, but she had to study for an exam. It was late at night, and I fell asleep while reading a book about the occult and paranormal. I was still thinking about my experience with Olivia. Part of me wasn't completely sure what had happened. I woke up a couple hours later with a sharpening noise, as if something had been broken like glass. But since I was home alone, I have no pets. This meant someone was in the house. Terrified and caught by surprise, I decided to lock my bedroom door. Everything was silent, or almost. I could hear footsteps outside my bedroom walking through the corridor. I could also listen to the sound of my own heart pounding inside my chest. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped, and someone was trying to open my bedroom door. Realizing the door was locked, the person insisted. The man became angry and simply broke it by force. I was in bed, and now the man was in front of me. His face turned lustily disgusting when he saw me. I recognized him. He was the man who escaped. He was looking at my body up and down and licked his lips. "Leave me alone, or I'll call the cops," I shouted. He smiled disgustingly and said, "I never did that with a young girl," and lunged at me. I lost all hope. I was about to be raped. Tears rolled down my eyes. He started licking my neck disgustingly. I was screaming for help, but who was listening? He covers my mouth with his dirty hand, then he tied me to the bed, ripped off my clothes. He stuffed my mouth with his disgusting underwear. I never thought my life would end like this. He was standing in front of me with no clothes on his body. He holds up a sharp knife. He smiled disgustingly at me. I couldn't believe what I saw. The maniac let me go, and he was now stabbing himself in his throat. As he was doing so, he was mumbling some words. At first, I couldn't understand, because his voice was distorted due to him being suffocated in his blood. But finally, I captured what he was saying. The man eventually managed to kill himself. Just tied on the bed, trembling for a minute, watching his dead body, I managed to unite myself. I called the cops. The police came with an ambulance, and they took the corpse of the man who tried to rape me and wanted to kill me. I told them what happened, or at least what I saw. They thought I wasn't making any sense out of it, but since I was attacked in my own house, I knew the case would be closed with no further problems or investigations. In a word, I wasn't going to get in trouble. A few days later, I was stunned to know who the man was. He was precisely the same individual who had murdered Olivia, my best friend's sister.
My name is Dexter Dillon. I'm 22 years old. A few months ago, I went to a heavy metal music festival. There, I was fortunate enough to meet an awesome girl. She was about my age. Her name was Claudia. We got along very well and had a great time. Plus the fact that she was beautiful, it didn't hurt either. Claudia had the most amazing long dark curly hair. She was dressed in black and her big green eyes were stunning. So after the music festival was over, we exchanged contacts and decided that we wanted to keep seeing each other. For the moment, we were just friends. But I have to admit I was hoping for something more in the future. And indeed, I was definitely going to be experiencing something more. Careful for what you wish for. Luckily enough, Claudia didn't live that far away from me. Just 1 hour of distance by car, when she invited me to have dinner at her place. I was happy and excited. It was late October, so Halloween season was already showing itself, with skeletons, witches, and pumpkins placed outside some of the houses. Plus, that particular night when I was driving to Claudia's place, it was raining. So the mood was really perfect for us to watch some horror movies. As I finally arrived, I parked the car in front of Claudia's garage, and she said I should. It was 9:30, a Sunday night. Young people. Yeah, we like to eat at late hours. I got out of the car and I called Claudia. She wasn't answering her cell phone, but I could hear it ringing inside her house, although the lights were out. I tried a couple more times. No answer. But again, I could listen to the cell phone ringing. I thought Claudia was making a fool out of me. Some kind of early Halloween prank? So I decided to play along. I got closer to Claudia's house. The front door was locked, but I circled around the house trying to find the back door. Bingo! There it was, and it was unlocked. I entered Claudia's house through the back door. I was inside the kitchen. I switched the lights on. Come out, wherever you are," I said. Eventually, I entered the living room. Again, I switched the lights on. I saw Claudia lying behind the couch. I started to laugh. "Is that the best you can do, Claudia? I can see you, lying on your back. Your hair gave you up immediately." But she wasn't answering. I approached her. When I touched her, I realized there was blood all over her dark clothes. The blood was now on me. I turned her over and I screamed. Claudia's throat had been cut, slaughtered. Her big green eyes were still open, but now completely lifeless, although still revealing the fear and terror that she must have felt when being murdered. The last moments of her life. As for me, I started feeling dizzy. As I looked at Claudia's dead body, her clothes and face filled with blood. My head was spinning around. My brain went into shock. And I fainted. I passed out completely. The surprise was even bigger when I woke up. I wasn't in the same room. There was someone dead in front of me. Still. But it wasn't Claudia anymore. It was a man in his early 40s, bald, fat, with a long beard. What is happening here? I thought to myself. As an answer, I realized I was holding a bloody knife in my right hand. The man's neck had also been slashed. By me. I was covered in this strange man's blood, and I had no idea what was going on. No memory whatsoever. Trying to remain happy, I explored the place where I was. It was some kind of cottage, a small wooden house. It was surrounded by woods. For some odd reason, my car was outside the cottage. Fortunately, thanks to my GPS, I was able to determine where I was. I didn't report the dead man to the police. I didn't even report Claudia's death. I was afraid I was going to be arrested, and the police would never believe my words. I don't remember anything. Probably the oldest excuse in the book. I went back home and burned my clothes. I washed the knife with bleach so there would be no traces of blood or fingerprints rather than my own. I thought it was better than to throw it away. It was safer to keep it with me instead of taking the chance of someone finding it. In any case, a few days later, the police came to my house. Claudia's dead body had been found, and of course, I was on her cell phone's contact list. I lied, saying I went there, as expected, but she didn't answer her door or her cell phone, so I left and returned home. It's not the first time a woman had second thoughts about being with me, so I didn't think it was such a big deal. That's what I told the police. But I didn't remember that I left my fingerprints all over Claudia's house. I became a suspect. I was called in by the police for a second interrogation. The night before I was supposed to go, I fell asleep, nervous and terrified. I had no idea what was going on, and I could go to jail if the police didn't believe me. When I woke up, it was the middle of the night. Once again, I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I wasn't in my own house this time. I was lying on the floor in a darkened room. The floor was wet. I got up trying to find a switch to turn on some kind of light. Finally, I found it. Now I could see. I could see I was inside a gloomy and stinky garage. I could see something else. Inside the garage, there were shelves, and the shelves were filled with heads of young dead girls. And on the floor, there it was, another dead man. Also in his early 40s like the other. He actually looked a lot like the previous one, except for the beard. They could be twins. This dead man's throat had been cut open like the other one, just like Claudia's. And on the floor next to this man,
Another knife. I couldn't take it anymore. Screaming, I called the police. Someone, please, tell me what is going on. I don't mind going to jail. I just need to understand what is wrong with me. The police traced the call and came to me. I was placed under arrest. On my first night sleeping in my cell, Claudia herself came to me in my dreams. And she said, "Hello, Dexter. I'm sorry, but when you came to my house, my spirit was still trapped and filled with anger. I entered your body, and I took control of you. I used you to kill my 2 murderers. Thank you. Now I'm free." When I woke up, I told what happened to the police. Of course, no one believed me. How could they? Even if they would, the physical evidence would say otherwise. Claudia's spirit is now free and avenged. But as for me, I'm going to jail for a long, long time. This happened when I was with my girlfriend and we were out on a vacation trip. We had booked a winter lodge in a remote tundra forest to enjoy the chilly winters in a classic wooden cabin. We tried hard to find a place, but most of them were shared resorts or too expensive. But my girlfriend Jenny had found a place online which fitted exactly with our budget, and it did not have any fancy gimmick. It was just a nice little cabin in the woods. After reaching the site, I was more than happy to see it. It was a very secluded place and a cute little wooden cabin with a small fireplace. The only thing that stood out as odd was the proprietor of the cabin. He didn't seem like a bad guy, but he was incredibly awkward. We didn't mind though. We figured since we lived so far away from people, we might just not be used to it. Jenny and I unwinded sitting in the lounge with hot chocolate in her hands. It was the perfect winter getaway. The only downfall was there was no signal or network. Everything was going smooth. Until night, when we went to bed. I heard strange rattling noises outside, and I went out to check it out. It was already past 3 a.m. in the morning, and Jenny was fast asleep. As I checked out, I was horrified at what I had seen. I saw a dead and mutilated moose just beside the cabin. I feared if the proprietor had hunted it and thought of asking in the morning, but as I turned around, I heard Jenny scream. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, only to find out she was not in the bed and the window was rolled up. My heart stopped beating for a second when I saw a trail of blood leading to the window, and I quickly followed it. As I did, I felt a hand push me down into the snow. My feet instantly went numb, but I found my footing and saw Jenny crying and lying down on the snow in a pool of blood. As I turned around, I saw the proprietor holding a bloodied axe with his eyes gouging out and his beard and arms drenched in blood with snow alike. My hand struggled to find something to defend him, but all it could was grab the snow. He came out from the window and tried to swing his axe at me with a roaring voice, but I managed to escape. I then escaped into the woods and managed to lose him in there, and quickly returned to pick up Jenny and went the other direction. We walked for miles until we found a round and sought help. When the police arrived, they didn't quite believe me, saying that the cabin had been abandoned for years since an old man who used to live there went mad and killed his child with an axe. I was in shock and went with them to check the place out. The only thing that was there was the dead moose. The cabin was empty. I didn't know what happened, but no one believed us. My name is Jack. I am my mom's boy. When I was 5 years old, my parents got separated. I remember they had a very toxic relationship. My father used to drink wine and beat my mom with sticks. I was too small at the time. I couldn't help my mom in those situations. One day I told my mom that let's start a new life and run away from the difficult one. "Can you live without a father?" she asked me. "Mom, you are enough for me," I told her. Soon my parents got separated. We bought a new house in another town. We began living the happiest days of our lives. She used to work late at night, so sometimes I had to wait for her. One night she called me and told me, "Listen, my sweetheart, I will be late today. There's some more work which I have to finish tonight, so don't worry." My mom told me and she hung the phone. It was a stormy night. I closed the door of the house. I came back to my room. It was thundering. I heard someone knocking at the door. When I was a kid and it was nighttime, I was not supposed to open the door. I went close to the door and asked, "Who's there?" The man standing behind the door replied, "Please open the door." I got scared and didn't say anything. He stood there and again called me, "Son, I'm your father." I got shocked after hearing him. "But you don't sound like my father," I replied. "Son, I know. You don't like me. I did wrong with you and your mom. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Open the door." He screamed at me. I was sweating. I wanted to see the man. I looked at him through the peephole. I could see my father, but barely recognize him. His face was pale. The red eyes scared the hell out of me. My head was throbbing with fear. I was not able to move. The man started banging on the door. "Open the door, you son of a bitch!" he screamed. I could see my dad's face turn devilish. I was so scared I peed in my pants. The man slowly went back and disappeared into the darkness. I stood there for a long time. When my mom arrived, I told her about this. My mom told me that it was a bad dream because my father passed away last year because of an overdose of drugs, but I knew it was not a dream.
My son, now 10, doesn't talk much about his past life experiences. However, from the age of 3 to 5, he told us all about them. One in particular really stuck with us and was spoken often about.
"Hey, Dad. My last dad didn't like me. He made me sleep in a cage."
I would reply, "That's not very good. I'm glad you're with me now then." This past life of where his previous dad, keeping him in a cage and locking him up, etc., it came up quite a fair bit, especially between the ages of 3 to 5. The final time he mentioned it, we were driving one of the back roads of New South Wales, Australia, near Lightning Ridge. We were going past an old shack house with sheds about the back. Son pipes up and says,
"That's one of my old houses there. I was locked in those cages a lot. One day I got out, and Dad stabbed me in the stomach with a rusty knife. I think I'm buried about here too. I'm glad I'm with you now, Dad."
My wife, older son, and I were dumbstruck. Youngest son said it all with such conviction, and finally, that we didn't even bother to question him. I remember our prolonged silence to this day. After he mentioned it that day, we never heard him speak of any past lives again. This happened last month, and I'm still in shock. I was preparing for my date, and I went to the mall and bought a special dress for the night. My boyfriend Mike had invited me for the dinner. I was super excited, of course. I put the dress in my bag and drove to my boyfriend's house. It was full moon night and the stars were twinkling in the sky. I was in a full romantic mood. I was driving while imagining how wonderful and magical that night was going to be. After an hour of drive, I was finally there. Mike's house. I got out of my car and knocked on the door. My boyfriend opened the door. "Hey, I'm so glad you're here, Amelia. I was waiting for you." "But that goes without saying," he said with a big smile on his face. He took me to the dinner table while holding my hand. I felt very loved by him. He prepared dinner for me. It made me feel very happy and lucky to have him as my life partner. "Oh my goodness, did you prepare all this for me?" I asked him with a big smile on my face. "Of course, my darling. This is all for you only. I've never done such a thing for anybody else in my life. Only you deserve all this," he said, and hugged me. I love Mike because of his caring and loving nature. We both sat on our chairs at the beautiful table and enjoyed our meals. "Yummy, it's delicious. I can't believe that you cook such delicious food." I appreciated his cooking. "Thank you, Amelia. You are my life. Anything for you," he said, and made me blush. We finished the food and drank beer together. After finishing my beer, I told him I was going to the washroom. I changed my clothes and wore a beautiful red dress. I was anxious to see his reaction to my little sexy surprise. When I came from the washroom wearing the hot red dress, Mike's jaws dropped and he told me that I looked amazing, and he stared at me for a long time. I could feel love in the air as we began to move closer to each other. He grabbed me and I felt so relaxed that I closed my eyes. I felt like someone was standing in front of me. As I opened my eyes, I saw nothing. After some time, moments of love, so to speak, Mike fell asleep immediately. Eventually, my own eyes got heavy and I closed them. In my mind, in my thoughts, however, something bizarre was taking place. I was having blurry visions of a woman figure as she was sitting on the bed. I opened my eyes widely in fear. There was no one. I thought it must have been my imagination. The excitement and the beer playing tricks on me, finally I fell asleep. I came back to my senses when I felt something heavy on my body. I thought it was my boyfriend. To be sure, I tried to move one of my hands, but it froze. I couldn't move it. I tried to move my head slowly. It felt like an impossible task. Finally, I turned around and barely opened my eyes. I was still able to see that my boyfriend was sleeping. Now I was feeling like my heart was throbbing. I could even hear that. As I turned my head, I saw someone sitting on my body. A woman. That woman. Her pale face was so scary. The anger on her big, menacing, dark eyes was so intense that I could feel it. It appeared as she was dressing a black shadow instead of real clothes. I was not able to move and speak. I was not able to blink. "You did that wrong," she finally whispered, and then she continued. "He is mine. Mine only. Leave my husband or I will kill you." Suddenly I could hear a loud bird noise. I woke up sweating. It was already morning and I was still shocked in fear. Maybe it was a nightmare, but it felt so disturbingly real. I whispered to myself. My boyfriend was also awake, and he greeted me. "Good morning." "Mike, are you married? Please don't lie to me," I asked. "Oh, I was going to tell you about that. Yes, I was married, but my wife died in a car accident 3 years ago. Why do you ask?" After listening to him, I grabbed my bag and walked towards the main door. I had to leave. "What happened, Julie? I'm sorry, but I was about to tell you. It's not like I was cheating on you. I had to move on with my life," he shouted, running after me still half naked. I didn't pay any attention and I didn't turn back. As fast as I could, I got into my car and drove back to my house. Throughout the next days, Mike kept calling me and sending me messages and emails. I didn't want to reply because I didn't want anything to do with the ghost of his dead wife. Unfortunately, I was soon to realize that wasn't my choice. The ghost of Mike's wife is now inside me. It lives in my mind and in my brain. It shares my body with my own soul. I was forced to go back to Mike by the ghost of his dead wife. Emma was her name. Now Mike has 2 women all to himself, me and Emma, although he has no idea, but I do. I wish I could get back my old body, but for the moment I have no idea how. And if I can't, I just might kill myself, if it's the only option, because I can't take this for too much longer. To be a prisoner in my own body, I might as well be a free ghost, instead of a living woman trapped with no possible escape. I have to stop recording myself now, because I feel that Emma is about to take control of me again. Goodbye to anyone who may be watching this. Ghosts are real, and many of them are not friendly at all.
My name is Matthew, and I'm 45 years old. These events took place a couple of years ago. Me and my wife, Bebe, were very happy because our only daughter, Stephanie, was doing great in high school. She wanted to become a scientist, and her grades were very promising, and we were hoping that she would get into a good university. Our daughter was always a little bit of a weird child, not to me or to her mother, but you know what I mean. Stephanie was the typical loner, immersed in her own world, reading, playing, video games, or even taking long walks. She liked nature quite a lot. Stephanie is an only child. Bebe used to be jealous because I was the only person that Stephanie really seemed to like. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I know now it is the truth. Our daughter enjoyed my company and was relatively affectionate and warm towards me, which didn't happen with other people, including her mother. Stephanie wasn't rude by any means, but rather cold and distant. She seemed to be bored and annoyed by anyone else, except me. One thing that Stephanie loved since her early years was Halloween, which was not surprising, since among her tastes were horror movies, ghosts and demon stories, and all sorts of mythology. Nothing unusual here. For some reason, intelligent people seem to be inclined to such areas. So 2 years ago, as I mentioned, although Stephanie was already 17 years old, she still wanted to go trick-or-treat. Me and my wife thought it was kind of awkward, but Stephanie is a brilliant mind, and sometimes it comes with some eccentricities. But my wife immediately became fond of the idea when Stephanie said,
I want Mother to come with me. Just the 2 of us. I think we should develop our relationship.
Really, dear? Oh, of course. I'm so glad to hear you say those words. I'm sure we will have a lot of fun on Halloween night.
I'm sure we will, Mother.
Stephanie replied in her numb and robotic voice tone, as usual. I was happy for both of them. Seeing my daughter wanting to bond with her mother was an excellent step forward when it came to our family life. Halloween night arrived. I stayed home with the task of giving candy to the young people that came to the door. My daughter and my wife went to trick-or-treat as promised. Stephanie was dressed as a female devil, in red, wearing horns and makeup. As for Bebe, she went as a witch, wearing black, with a typical witch hat. It was already 3 a.m. when Stephanie arrived, alone. Where is your mother, Stephanie?
I don't know, Dad. I just lost her.
You lost her? How?
It was dark. There were many people in the street. I assumed she was home already.
Stephanie answered. I called the police and reported that my wife was missing. A few days later, I saw a TV report on the local news.
A woman had been found in the woods in the town. She is dead and dressed as a witch. Her face had been completely disfigured by some kind of acid.
They were unprofessional enough to show the image on video. I identified the body as being the one of my wife. I threw up when I saw what was left of her face, lacerated and melted. Again, I contacted the police, completely hysterical. I told them I had identified my wife on the gruesome news report. The answer that I got from them only made things even more disturbing.
Yes. We were actually going to send an officer to your home. I'm afraid we have bad news. We arrested your daughter. She seems to be the one who killed your wife. Please come to the nearest police station.
I couldn't believe those words. I went to the police station as fast as I could. It was true. My daughter Stephanie had no idea that she was being filmed by a civilian. Stephanie convinced her mother to go with her into the woods, claiming that she had a surprise waiting there. And indeed, she had. Stephanie, being an expert in chemistry, had prepared an acid solution, and she threw that acid into her mother's face, killing her own mother in such an agonizing manner. When I visited Stephanie in jail and asked my daughter why she did that, her answer was the most disturbing one.
Because I'm in love with you, Dad. I always hated my mother for being your woman. I wanted to kill her and disfigure her. And I thought with her gone, in time, you would learn to love me in a romantic way.
My name is Julianne. I moved out of my parents' house last year because I couldn't take the abuse of my alcoholic father anymore. I still like to visit my mom and siblings from time to time, but after my most recent visit, I probably won't be back ever again. It was Thanksgiving. I arrived at the house early in the morning, so everyone was probably still asleep. I snuck inside through the back door, so as not to disturb anyone. My brother Adam, who is 15 years old, was still in bed, sleeping. I'd missed him so much that I couldn't help but watch him for a brief moment. As I was standing beside him, I touched his face and hair affectionately. He looks so cute when he sleeps. I then made my way down the hall to check on my little sister Valerie, who is 6. Everything was dark except for the light coming from her bedroom. I peeked inside and saw her playing with her dolls on the floor. How cute. In the other room, my mom and dad were sleeping. I wanted to see Valerie, so I knocked on her door and hid behind the curtains. She opened the door and came out to look around but didn't see me. I could see the bruises on her face clearly. No doubt they were caused by my asshole father constantly beating her. I wanted to hug her, but I didn't come here to engage with anybody. I just wanted to see them. When she closed the door, I headed for the attic. I was feeling nostalgic and wanted to see some of my old things that were stored there. Pictures from when I was in school, my diary, my video games. I was such a fan of dolls and other girly things like my sister was. I felt tears running down my face. The past is gone, I thought as I fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of the door opening and tiny bare feet running inside. It was my little sister Valerie. "Happy Thanksgiving, Julianne. I knew you would come," she said with a giggle. "I saw you when you were watching me. Why did you leave us? I miss you a lot." Tears rolled down her eyes as she ran up and hugged me. "I won't let you go anywhere again," she said. "But I have to go, Valerie. I can't stay here," I replied, hugging her back. Valerie ran down saying, "Stay here. I'll get Mom." She came back with her mom, but she didn't look happy to see me. I mean, of course she wasn't happy. I left the house without her permission. "Mom, I'm sorry," I said with tears in my eyes as I hugged her. Valerie smiled. I could see a little relief on my mom's face as she started to hug me back. Suddenly, my father came in, holding a cross in his hand. Just the sight of him made me angry. "Go away, you evil spirit! Leave my family!" he yelled. He then kicked my little sister toward me and said, "Take it as your Thanksgiving dinner and leave us!" He did that because I was a ghost. I killed myself years ago because of him. He never loved me. I was depressed for years before I decided to end it all by overdosing on sleeping pills. Now I can see he didn't love my sister either. My temper quickly reached its boiling point. My mom and sister took a few steps back as I grabbed my father and lifted him into the air. He held the cross up to my face, but it didn't hurt me. I think crosses only work when it's in the hands of people with pure souls, so my sinful dad was out of luck. His face turned pale when I swatted the cross away and smiled, revealing my sharp teeth. I then bit into his stomach and started eating his intestines like spaghetti. "Happy Thanksgiving!" I laughed. My mother and sister started to relax after I finished my meal and wiped the blood off my lips. Now that my father was gone, I could finally stop wandering around. I was at peace, and I knew my family would be too. I didn't need to haunt my house anymore. I was ready to cross over.
Everyone has their own plan for summer vacation. Some people go for tours, some visit their loved ones. But for me, it's my grandmother's town. When I was little, I used to go there every vacation. That place was filled with beautiful trees and landscapes. Tree climbing had always been one of my favorite things to do. It didn't matter how tall they were. As long as they were trees, I could climb them. My personal record for reaching the top of a tree was 60 seconds, which probably isn't that impressive, but for me at the time, I was proud of that. One summer vacation when I was 11, I'd always climb this one tree in our front yard and then swing on it for hours. But one nightmarish incident made me stay away from trees from that point on. It started like any other day. I went out to the front yard after breakfast, ready to do some climbing as usual. I kicked off my shoes and took off my socks since I was more adept at climbing while barefoot. Then I made my way up the tree trunk and grabbed onto the lowest branch I could. Closing my eyes, I decided to just dangle there in the air, enjoying the wind brushing against my face. After 5 minutes, I heard something digging into the tree trunk below me. I looked down, and to my surprise, I saw a bald man with gray skin and a black coat sitting cross-legged at the base of the tree. At least, it looked like a man. With his sharp nails, he was etching something into the tree, but I couldn't see what it was. Instead of calling out for my grandma, I stupidly asked him, "Do you need any help?" The man looked up at me with his orange eyes and smiled, almost as if he were happy I acknowledged his existence. Then his smile grew wider, revealing his razor-sharp teeth.
"Calm down now, or I'll come up and get you."
My face went pale after seeing this guy's monstrous teeth, and I just froze. Clinging to the branch a little tighter while my bare feet dangled above his head. Whoever this guy was, he wasn't human. I snapped out of my daze when the man stood up and began reaching for my legs with his inhumanly long arms. I quickly brought my legs up over the branch, then started climbing for my life. After climbing halfway up the tree, I looked down to see if he was still there, but he was gone. Not a single trace was left of him. Suddenly, 2 large hands grabbed both of my ankles, pulling my feet from under me and causing me to fall on my back. Before I knew it, I was hoisted into the air, dangling upside down by my feet. I frantically looked up to see the creature's horrifying face smiling down at me. I don't know how it reached the top before I did. I didn't even see it pass me. This thing's movements defied logic.
"I win.
It said while licking its teeth.
Now for my prize."
The creature then opened its mouth inhumanly wide, revealing hundreds of sharp teeth. It then slowly brought my feet up to its open maw, ready to devour me. I screamed at the top of my lungs as I kicked my legs frantically, trying to free myself, but to no avail. I was only saved when my grandma came outside after I screamed. The creature quickly dropped me before disappearing without a trace, almost as if it never existed. I got out of that tree so fast and ran straight into my grandmother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I tried to explain to her what I'd seen, but she didn't believe me. Years have passed since then. A shiver runs up my spine whenever my friends plan for summer vacation. I'll never forget that thing's face for as long as I live.